ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kevin Jackwitz. This is the Kaged Review, and this is my review, the spoiler review for The Invisible Man, directed by Lee Winnell, and this is a story that originated from an H.G. Wells novella, and they've really updated it, and I really love the way they updated it, and I talked about that in my non-spoiler review, but I didn't want to talk about specifics. So here, you have Elisabeth Moss, who plays Cecilia Cass, who is a girlfriend or wife that is leaving her boyfriend or husband. Adrian Griffin, who is played by Oliver Jackson Cohen. And she has a sister, Emily Cass, played by Harriet Dyer. You have Aldous Hodge as James Lanier, who is a cop who is letting Cecilia stay with him and his daughter while, just as she's leaving her, we'll call him boyfriend. Storm Reed plays Sydney Lanier, the daughter. And Michael Dorman plays Tom Griffin, who is Adrian Griffin's brother. So, the story here is, you start this movie with Cecilia Cass. She is in an abusive relationship. She decides to leave, so she drugs her boyfriend. She tiptoes quietly through the house, getting all her stuff, gets the alarm, disarmed, takes off, accidentally sets off a car alarm in the garage by trying to free the dog. The dog has a collar, and she's trying to let the dog go too. Apparently, he was abused too. So she catches up with her sister on the road nearby the house. They take off. Not very long later, she hears that Adrian Griffin, her boyfriend, had killed himself and left her quite a bit of money. So Tom Griffin, the brother, is supposed to be the executor of the estate for Adrian. And so all of this is dependent on the fact that Elisabeth Moss can never be considered mentally unfit, I guess it was. And so you start seeing things that kind of play off the fact that maybe this guy has figured out a way to make himself invisible. And I love the way they start playing with the audience's mind. Like, you'll see a pan shot where somebody's walking from one room to another, and then the camera will go back to a specific point in the first room and just kind of hang there, and then come back to Elisabeth Moss. And it's like, they did a lot of things where it's like you don't know if you're seeing what you saw or if you're seeing anything at all, or they're really playing with the audience members' minds, and I really like that. There's parts when Elisabeth Moss starts to think that there's an invisible man there, like she's looking at a chair and there's a depression in the chair, and so she thinks there's somebody sitting in there, and so they pan to the chair and there's this depression, and you're looking like, well, damn, is that somebody sitting there, or is that just the way the chair is? And you never, you don't know. But one thing I really wish they would have done with this movie that they did not do, and I think it would have made it way better of a psychological movie, is very early on in this process of figuring out if there's an invisible man or not, you kind of know there is. Because, for example, Elisabeth Moss, she's dragging a sheet across the floor, and then there's weight, she can't pull the sheet anymore, and you see the footprints. She sees the footprints. And so there's kind of physical evidence that there's somebody there. I wish they would have done it in a way that didn't show you any kind of footprints or anybody's breath, because this movie develops into she's telling people that there's this invisible man, and of course, you hear that, most people are just going to think she's crazy. And I think it would have been very cool if they would have made the audience guess on whether she was actually losing her mind or just been driven crazy by the abuse, or if there was actually an invisible man there. I think that would have been a much better psychological trip. My personal opinion, it was a good movie. I really liked it. I love what they did with it. I'm just saying, from a psychological thriller standpoint, that would have been very cool. But anyway, you do know that there is somebody. He has made himself invisible, and it turns out that this guy, he's incredibly smart with technology, and he's got this suit that somehow retrofits itself and becomes invisible. Like, all these cameras kind of reflect what's going on, and so you can't really see what's going on. when you're inside that suit, it just makes you invisible. And so I thought that that was kind of cool. It was definitely a stretch that we hadn't seen before with technology and its possibilities. So, unfortunately, Cecilia Cass is the only one who really knows this. And she's trying to convince everybody else that Adrian is still alive and he's, in fact, torturing her. She eventually goes to the house where they used to live together. Of course, Adrian isn't supposed to be there. She finds one of these suits and takes it. And then she tells her sister, they meet up at a restaurant, that she has proof that Adrian is still alive. And so during that conversation, you see a knife come up out of thin air, slices Emily Cass's throat, and goes straight to Cecilia Cass's hand. Of course, nobody else saw what happened. Here's one issue I have with that scene in particular. This movie is very reliant on cameras to tell the story. House security cameras, other kinds of security cameras. And so in this restaurant, it's not such a big deal because not every restaurant has security cameras in it. So I can give that one a pass. But most upscale restaurants are going to have some kind of camera in it. So that's a point to make. When you're telling a story that deals so heavily on cameras to tell, half of what's going on, you have to acknowledge that in every scene. And that was one thing I think they really didn't do very well on. After that scene where the sister dies, they take Cecilia to a hospital, a mental hospital. And now we're dealing with a place that definitely has cameras all over the place. Like all over. There's cameras on every floor in probably every room. And so Adrian, of course, is tormenting her. And when they first get her into the psych ward and they sedate her, you plainly hear Adrian saying, "Surprise." So the whole concept here is Adrian at one point wanted to get Cecilia pregnant. She was taking pills to prevent that. And then, of course, Adrian knew about that the whole time. Well, come to find out, while they're doing blood work in this psych ward, they find out that she's pregnant. So Adrian decides, I'm going to give you one last chance to come back to me, because he's gracious like that. Cecilia obviously fights toward it, or fights against it rather, and then Adrian instead threatens Sydney Lanier, the cop's daughter, who Cecilia Cass became very good friends with. And so there's this fight inside her cell. Cecilia Cass, she's in the shower, and she's got a pen as a weapon. And so she waits for Adrian to get close to her, and you can see the rain or the water beating off of him. And she's like, "There you are," and stabs him a bunch of times. The suit actually starts to flicker, and you can kind of see him. It goes in and out of invisibility and visibility. And then there's this big fight in the hospital, mainly with Adrian against a bunch of guards. And of course, he's invisible. So I'll grant you that he's invisible. He has a distinct advantage in taking out a bunch of guards. That's not the issue. There's a bunch of cameras around, especially in the hallways of these places. You're not telling me that somebody didn't notice this and think to call the cops or something like that. So that's a big plot hole there. But I'm giving it a pass, even though I shouldn't, because everything else was very well done. So there's this big cat and mouse scene as they're leaving the hospital through the parking lot. The big fight between Adrian and the guards allows Cecilia to escape. And so they're both heading to James Lanier's house, where Adrian kind of shows up rather quickly, and he starts kind of tormenting Sydney. Then James comes in because Cecilia had called him and said, "You need to get home. I think Sydney's in danger." The Invisible Man just wears out James Lanier. And so Cecilia shows up. She's got a gun in hand, and he is beating the hell out of James, and he goes at Sydney. And then Cecilia tells Sydney to drop, and she does, and then she shoots the Invisible Man a bunch of times in the chest. And it turns out the whole thing was Tom Griffin, the brother, who had orchestrated all of this. She pulls off the mask, it's Tom Griffin. They wind up going with a bunch of cops to find Adrian tied up and gagged in a dummy wall inside his own house. And so Cecilia, she's not convinced that it still wasn't Adrian behind everything. She's not convinced that Adrian didn't have some major part in all of this. And so she goes to visit Adrian at dinner. And keep in mind, she still has one of those suits that make you invisible. So during this dinner, she says she needs to go to the bathroom. Everything is being listened to, and she's got a camera facing the dinner table so the camera sees exactly what's happening. So she goes to the bathroom. She puts on the invisible suit. She becomes invisible. She grabs Adrian's arm with a knife and slices his throat with his own arm. And that's what the camera sees. The camera sees him committing suicide. So she goes back to the bathroom, comes back out very quickly, freaks out. And then James, who is a cop, comes up and he sees Cecilia coming out with the bag, with this suit. And she's like, he killed himself. It's all on camera. And she's like, isn't that what you heard? And he's like, yeah, that's what I heard. And so she kind of makes sure that she's free from all his psychological and physical torment. And that was kind of where they ended the movie. And I thought it was really well done. Like I said, I really wish they would have dug more into the psychological aspect of it. Is she really losing her mind, or is it actually an invisible man? If they hadn't shown as much of like the Invisible Man right away as they had, I think that could have been a cool segue from the first act to the second act. Is she really losing her mind? And then you kind of shows that there actually is the Invisible Man there, and continue on from there. However, I really did like the movie. There were the plot devices that I mentioned that were a little bit weak, especially when you're dealing with a psych ward and the fact that they're going to have cameras everywhere. Now, to be fair, they did have a lot of guards come in, and the Invisible Man took them all out. So, I'll give that a toss-up, because maybe all the guards came because they did see something. Maybe you can explain it away like that. But yeah, dude, it was a lot of fun, and I love the way they really got the audience involved in it, too. Like I said, the certain little things they did, panning the camera to one location and hanging there for a second, or the depression in the chair. All these little things that make you think that maybe there is or maybe there's not somebody there. It was really cool, man. It's a really cool way of doing a lot with a little, like I said, and that was a great way of doing it. So ladies and gentlemen, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I stand by that. I think it was a really fun movie. Definitely gets you invested. So that's kind of where I'm at. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackowitz, Caged Nation, out.